Welcome to From Caving In to Crushing It, the podcast for those who find themselves immersed in adversity and choose to write their story instead of having others write it for them. I'm Deraney, and I'm your host. Jahmaal, Marshall, thanks so much for coming on, my friend. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, bro.
You know, I always love the pre-recorded conversation because it gives me an opportunity just to refresh my memory and get to know the guest a little more. And I was just commenting. I know the audience can't see this now because it's first going out audio, but the signs you have behind you, one very heartfelt with a story, and one cut is snarky, and I love it. We won't get into that now unless you want to, but I love that. But, I want to thank Jack Gillet for this introduction. I always like to thank the people who introduce us because it's wonderful to get to meet beautiful human beings from other beautiful human beings. So I thank him for that introduction. So Jahmaal, I always like to first point out, when I'm talking to somebody about how life is not linear. When we're growing up, we're taught that it is, and it's not our parents' fault or our relatives' fault or friends' fault. So everybody passes on what they learned. And, we're told that if you do A plus B plus C, D is going to happen. And it's not true. There's always going to be something that gets in between one of those letters and kind of derails our course and makes it more of a circuitous route. So I know you have a story, and I want to give you the opportunity to tell your story. And I'd like you to reach back as far as you need to locate that defining moment in your life that either tapped you on the shoulder or hit you upside the head with a 2x4 and made you realize, hey, Jahmaal, there's a better way to live. And I'm not going to retreat. I'm going to fight through this and become stronger because of it. Would you care to tell us that story?
Man, the biggest thing is picking which one. Because I believe that each of us, if you've lived on this planet, I'll say longer than 20 years, especially longer than 30 years, for those of us who are getting that place, you have defining moments there that are momentous in moving you forward or potentially in pausing you and pushing you back.
Feel free to pick more than one because usually they kind of intertwine. So.
Yeah, they usually on-ramp to one another, but I would say to date, the biggest defining moment would be the death of my father. And I think it's how it happened. He passed from natural causes, and I'm grateful for that. He was cared for, surrounded by people who love him. And I was actually at the hospital when it happened.
Okay.
But for the better part of 2017, he was really, really sick. He had a major stroke January 21st of 2017 that paralyzed his right side. So he had to learn to talk again, had to learn to walk again. All of the occupational, physical, speech therapy, did all of that. And then in July of 2017, there was a care plan to begin to bring him home. He was improving, but I was like, ooh, it's going to be a lot.
Yes.
And I was, one of my clients, his dad was a pilot. And so he would often just say, whenever you need to go home, you can fly standby. And so I was living in the Midwest. I was a full-time counselor back then,
right.
Public speaking and promotion. And I was just coming home as often as I could. And it was hard, having a full caseload, having all that work, having a complete separate life, 500, miles away in the Midwest and coming back to DC. And then I finally got to the place where 2017 of April, I announced to my manager that I said, I'm ready to resign. I'd wanted something. I was doing what I loved, but I wanted to do it in a different context.
Sure.
And so there was a plan for me to come back to work in Columbia, Pennsylvania as a project manager for an independent website, continue some mentoring and counseling. And I really thought, okay, well, and Dad's going to be coming home. He's slowly starting to get better. So I finally got back September 21st. September 23rd, he got critically ill.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Wow.
Critically ill. And we pretty much lived in either the emergency room or the hospital for the next 2.5 months.
Wow.
And then December 5th, he passed away, and for your audience, just to let them know, like my faith's really important to me.
Hmm.
He went home to be with the Lord. I
Yes.
remember
Yes.
when the doctors came to get me because he asked to not be resuscitated, and they
Okay.
honored that request.
Right.
Um, I came in, and he looked so peaceful,
Oh.
like I'd never seen him before. And I read a psalm over him. There's a hymn called "Abide with Me." I read a couple of stanzas of that. I kissed him on the forehead, and I said, "James, I'm going to see you on the other side, man."
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And that
Oof.
was a defining moment because for the first 3 weeks, it was really just a blur. You know, my mother's birthday is December 10th. My
Oh boy.
birthday is the
Right.
18th of December. Their anniversary is the 31st. You
Oh
know,
my goodness. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Christmas is the 25th. It's
Yeah,
just
of
so many
course.
different things that happen. And so
Right.
I don't remember any of those things
Yeah.
because his service, his funeral was the 22nd. Beautiful service. So many
Hmm.
people pitched in to help.
Uh,
So many people were there. But it wasn't until January
mm,
where it hit me that I will never see this man again. I'll never
yeah.
touch this man again. I'll
Yep.
never be in his presence. I'll never get advice from him.
Yep.
And I hated God. I
Yep.
hated
I
Jesus. I hated
understand.
the gospel. I
Yep.
hated everything I stood for, everything I taught, my faith.
Mhm.
I questioned everything I was as a man.
All right.
And I went through a long season of just darkness. Instead of being this externally facing person that was traveling, promoting, and speaking and counseling, I just went in my room and just
Hmm.
turned on YouTube and ate cereal and threw a hoodie on. I became very isolated. Um, I chose to not take the job up in Pennsylvania because I felt like I wanted to stay close to home,
Hmm.
just to honor my mom in the early stages
Of
of grief.
course. Of course.
Um, and I would just walk outside. There was a tennis court not too far from where I live at. It wouldn't be anybody on it. So I'll just go out there and just yell F bombs to the
Yeah.
sky all day.
Oh yeah.
That was
Yep.
my prayer life. That's at least what it had become, but that's all I knew to say. I
Right.
didn't know to say anything else.
Sure.
Um, and um, slowly what happened, I started going to this group thing called Grief Share, and kind of processing where I was. But I was raw. I felt like I was a little too raw for the people there because they were talking about, well, I've lost my husband or my mom or my dad or this, and I'm just praying. And I was like, I really hate this. I hate being here. I hate God.
Right.
I wasn't holding back on any of the ways that I felt.
Right.
And even a friend of mine who's my former pastor, um, he really helped me. He says, I feel like you can just be. Don't try to come here at church. Don't serve. He said, you've
Mhm.
been running at breakneck speed for like
Yeah.
8 years, and then you come home and your dad passes. You just need a break.
Yes.
And so I took pretty much nearly a year off
Okay.
and just took a break. And through walking out in nature, I figured out
Mm.
this tennis court.
Wow.
And I was just, spitting expletives to the sky. And I mean, I'm sure people will walk by and think this dude is crazy.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
said, why don't I go into the woods? In this neighborhood, we have about 4 Civil War forts. And I
Oh
said,
wow.
deer and
Okay.
foxes and wild turkey, they don't speak any
Yeah.
English, so they
No,
can't.
they don't. Uh-huh.
So I'll just go in there and do it. And somehow being in that kind of enclosed nature,
Yeah.
beautiful trails,
Hmm.
God got a hold of me. It took months,
Yeah.
nearly a year, but I kept asking, like, why did you take my dad?
Yes.
And, you know, the retort was, Jahmaal, 12 years ago, I gave him to you as a best friend. You didn't
Mm.
always have him like that. And most people who are listening to this podcast don't know I had a very abusive childhood. My dad, before, and it's a long story, but before God got a hold of him, he was a former crack and heroin addict and an alcoholic.
Oh boy.
So he was mean enough to be Satan himself. And so I grew up into my early 20s hating him.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
I had a lot of my own issues with, smoking and drinking. It just wasn't an addiction for me.
Right. Right. Numbs
Promiscuous
the pain.
activity
Yeah.
in high school.
Hmm.
And when I tried to, become a person of faith, I said, well, I'll just look at pornography now. So I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not in bed with
Mm.
anybody. And
Yep.
so just so many addictions and outlets to process my own pain
Right.
before
Right.
being serious about my relationship with God. And I happen to be the one that led him to God in 2006.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
never thought that would happen. And then it wasn't until about 2008, 2009 where we really became really tight.
Oh.
Or I went away to get some spiritual, mental, physical counseling for myself. Before I
Right.
became a counselor, I went through
Oh, okay. All right.
months of
That's
counseling
meaningful
and
for you.
invested,
Yeah.
yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of time and
Hmm.
thousands of dollars into my own. Um, and then coming back, we just, before I interned and decided to go back full time, we just became thick as thieves. And um, so what God's retort was to me was like, sometimes that never happens between fathers and sons or
Yes.
fathers and daughters, but someone you didn't have, I gave him to you. And think about the
Mm.
last year of his life. He was just existing. He wasn't really living.
Right.
And that's so true. The thing about when you're seeing your family pass, and if it's slow, sometimes it's sudden, sometimes it's slow. He was just existing
Yeah.
through. It was
Oh,
hard to watch
gosh.
him that way. I mean, the stroke,
Yep.
all the stuff with his kidneys, it was just eating him
Of
alive.
course.
And
Right.
so when I thought about the reality of where he is, and I mean, I'm sure you have an audience of a myriad of beliefs, but I do
Yes.
believe in heaven. I was
Hmm.
just like, okay, he's really alive now, and that didn't take away the pain,
No.
but it helped me to process it in a way that was redemptive, in a way that said, all right, Jahmaal, like right now, you're just existing. You are
Hmm.
literally a shell of who you used to be. And rightfully so. You lost your dad. That's just,
Yeah.
that's what happens. Grief it's cruel.
Yes, it
It
is.
will knock the wind out of
No.
you.
No.
And so I got a second win, and slowly I knew coming back to DC, I had to work, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I found a job at a place called International Justice Mission, came in as a contractor. I literally interviewed for 11 minutes. And then 2 months later, I interviewed with someone in HR department for 5 minutes at a Starbucks and got a job, a full-time job.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm the type, once you talk to me, it's like, I want him on the team.
Yeah.
Interviews are never long.
I have seen that, my friend. That's I agree with you. You have some kind of magnetism that draws people towards you. So I agree with Starbucks and the that other place.
Just God's gift, man. And it was wonderful. It was a worthy work. It's
Yeah.
anti-human trafficking. And I
Mm,
worked as a global lead. So
okay.
that's a lot of capacity managing 18 different
Wow.
HR managers
Absolutely.
in four different, quadrants of our country.
Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't what I was called to do.
Okay.
And I realized, Drew, that I was on the run. And
Oh, okay.
it God had me there for a reason. Um,
Uh-huh.
but it wasn't until around late 2019, 2020, where I had, when I was in the woods and I would do this praying, and I
Yeah.
was, for a minute and a half, I would take out this Google Pixel phone and I
Okay.
would record some thoughts.
Ah.
And so I knew nothing about social media,
Hmm.
had wasn't on any social media. I had
Okay.
LinkedIn because I dropped my resume there,
Right, right.
and I put these videos on LinkedIn, and they started catching fire. It was weird
Wow.
because I wasn't trying to draw like an audience.
Attention. Yeah, yeah.
It really blew up around May of 2020,
Okay.
because we started working remotely. It
Hmm.
was COVID.
Yep.
And so I had that hour and a half when I was in traffic heading to Northern Virginia to my job in DC,
Yep.
how it is around here.
Yeah.
I had an hour and a half of time in the morning when I could just, walk. And
Wow.
so we went through a pandemic, but also then we start going through in the States a cultural pandemic with the murder of George Floyd.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yep.
And so I felt the need to speak to it in a way that was very bipartisan. And I think people weren't expecting that from me as a Black American.
Right, right.
And it wasn't super conservative. It
Hmm.
wasn't super liberal. It was just like, okay, liberals think this way, conservatives think this way. All right, God, what's your heart on this? I don't really care what liberals or conservatives are
Right,
thinking.
right.
Like, I
Exactly.
really
Exactly.
get in tune with a different frequency.
I hear
And
you.
I think that's what made it stand out,
Sure.
because everyone was singing like an alto, and I came in as a tenor, and it's like, oh, who's that? You know,
Yeah.
so that's kind of what put me on the map. But the defining moment happened long before, when I decided to start living again and actually using
Mm.
my voice again. We all have a myriad of superpowers, and one of mine is my voice.
Yes.
And when Dad passed, I didn't want to use that anymore. I just wanted to have.
Right.
And
Hmm.
so I think him passing, and then me processing that with God through very long, very dark road,
Yeah.
helped me to start say, I'll never see him this side of eternity, but he's there in the ether waiting for me to start running my race. And it's like, man, use the gifts you have while you're still here. Don't you
Absolutely.
advance, you live.
You know, I believe he's
All my life.
guiding you. He's guiding you too, man. He's with you on this journey. 'Cause my dad passed away too in 2019, somewhat similar to you. I was there in the hospital when it happened. So I'm with you. You're my brother. And I'll tell you, um, when you started using your voice again, did you find that you started to heal from within? Did it start to heal you telling your story and using your
Slowly.
voice? It did,
Yeah,
didn't it?
it
It's
was
because the same
cathartic.
happened with me and it was amazing. And so tell me how that felt and how that really made you stronger to what you're doing now.
I think sometimes like I'm big into journaling.
Okay.
And we'll talk later about like the work, but I even have my
Yeah.
clients do a good bit of
You do?
journaling
Okay, good.
because I
Good.
tell each of them what you write down, you have to reckon with.
Mm.
But it's also because sometimes we have so many ideas and thoughts that come to us.
Yeah.
It's okay to have that verbal journal.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
that's what I would videotape so much stuff. And people say, well, how'd you
Mm.
get so good on video? I was like, I don't need a video coach. I've
Hmm.
been putting in reps before there was even social media.
Yes, you're right.
So I would just videotape it. That way I had a mental, picture and visual of like what was going on in my mind at the time.
Mm.
And so telling my story became healing because it gave me the chance to process stuff I didn't even know was there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's something about hearing your own voice with your own ears about your own story that strikes some chords that have never been struck before. And I think unless you've gone through it, it's very challenging to describe it in words. I do. So let's get to how this personal journey has put you in professionally in what you're doing now, because I know you are reaching far and wide and helping a lot of people. I want the audience to hear that part of the story.
Got it. So, folks, at its inception, when those videos went out on LinkedIn, there was a guy by the name of Mark Metry who was a pretty big account back then, and he was uh, inviting people to either come on his podcast or be on theirs. And I just left a comment on his.
Mm.
Now, back then, he didn't know who I was. I had like maybe 500 connections,
Mm-hmm.
so he didn't see it, but someone else did, and it was a group by the name of the Safety Justice League, and they had been following my content. They said, "Hey, we want you to come on our podcast."
Wow.
Oddly enough, later Mark connected with me. First
Wow.
connections, but
Huh.
more importantly, I got on their podcast and I was wondering why, because like I was working an international justice mission. I didn't have a brand, didn't have a business,
Right.
but they wanted to hear my story.
Okay.
So it was a panel podcast of three guys and one girl.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that interview was just phenomenal because they asked me about my story, my past, my dad, my thoughts on like what was happening here in America
Right.
at that time. And the female panelist, I remember something she asked me. She said, "Are you a podcast host?" And I said, "No, I'm not. That's not really my thing." She said, "You should be. You're a natural."
Uh-huh.
And so the group, this is how things come full circle, that I was actually supposed to work for
I
in
love this.
Columbus,
Yeah, yeah.
they heard that podcast.
No way.
Yeah. And
Oh
they
my God.
said, "We didn't know you were like that." CEO was like, I didn't know that you were like that good. So he says, "I'm sending you $2,000. I want you to get yourself a MacBook Pro."
Yeah. All right.
And uh we're gonna actually give you a domain
Okay.
and what you want with it. And that's where Listen to Speak was born. And it was
Mm,
initially supposed to
wow.
be like a racial reconciliation sort
Yeah.
of
Right.
site podcast. But I didn't feel, even though that's very important to me,
Right. Right. Right.
I feel that I was the one to carry that mantle,
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I kind of played and toyed around with it. And I said, ultimately, as an exception, I am a counselor. I'm a certified counselor. I'm in the mental health space. I think I can maybe make a combination of
Hmm.
both.
Yep.
And so, and there was also a guy by the name of Rob Jollis, who was my mentor, a Jewish man, and he said, "Okay, he bought me a mic. The actual mic I'm speaking on right now."
Oh
He said,
yeah.
"All right, but he said you need to get to work." So,
Wow.
and also purchased me some space at Simplecast, because I was just starting to work, just getting on my feet, and I had
Yeah.
taken on all dad's bills. And so
Of
it was
course.
weird how I wasn't looking for Listen and Speak, but it was looking for me. And
Yes.
it was God's way of saying, like, listen, you've been running from this for a while. This is what I called you to do, you
Hmm.
know? And I remember having my first guest on, was a 5-time best-selling author. And he said, "I have some feedback for you." is actually one of my mentors, and this guy's about his business. I mean, he doesn't play games,
Hmm.
and he says, "I've done thousands of these, and I will put you in my top 20." He
Oh
says, "You're
my
not there yet.
gosh.
Keep going." So that put confidence in me, like, okay, I do know how to interview. And I
Hmm.
think about my, I've been a counselor for years. I've been,
Yeah.
doing this
Right.
work for 10 plus years, 16 plus years experience.
Right.
My understanding of human behavior helped me to pull something out of my guests that other people wouldn't.
Absolutely.
So
There is that is a gift, Jamal. And actually, I listened to one of your episodes on Listen and Speak. A young lady who was of Indian descent. It was a fascinating episode. And your ability to really, it is listen and speak, because you have this gift of listening to her words and her tone, but you're able to be that objective middle. Like you could have your views, but like what you said before about speaking to the middle, the bipartisan piece of it. It was something that had me gripped. I listened to the whole thing, and it had me thinking differently. And there were terms I never heard of. I kept Googling some of the terms that she was using in the Euro. I'm like, what is that? Oh, I get that. So it was really, thank you for that, because that was fascinating. And I'm going to be listening to more of your episodes. So that was definitely a calling, and you you are as good as advertised, my friend.
that's very kind of you, Drew, because I know you don't say anything you don't mean. So I take
No,
that to heart.
absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely. So tell me about what you're doing now and what you want the audience to know about you, because they are going to want to get in touch with you.
You got it. So obviously, since then, I've done many podcast episodes
Yep.
since the first. But what that's done is that's also opened doors. Two things I do. Also, as I understand, I do human behavior. I'm
Hmm.
a counselor. So in July of 2020, one thing I didn't tell you is that
Hmm.
through all the content, it's not so much the people who like and comment on your stuff, it's
Right.
those who usually don't comment.
Yeah.
But it was somebody who was commenting and they came into my DMs and they said, are you a counselor? And because it says your thing says global lead, because your profile, that's your landing page. I knew
Yes, it
nothing
is.
about that stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you don't have a profile that matches what you do, you have to do a lot of explaining.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
Yep.
this is July 2020. So the brand is not what it was today.
No, it's
And so
evolving. Yeah.
actually share with her, yeah, that is what I am. She said, "Are you like a public speaker too?" And so she says, "I have a family member that really needs some of your help." And so
Oh,
that was the first inbound lead I took after 2 years of not doing any counseling at all.
sure.
And so I was still working at International Justice Mission as a
Mhm.
global lead, but it was a side gig.
Okay.
And in 2021, I said, okay, I'd had a really good experience, got good feedback. But I said, wait a minute, I need to protect myself legally. So that's when I got, applied for
Okay.
the LLC.
Got
I
it.
got it. That's where Listen to Speak LLC was born in June of 2021. And then with the podcast, one thing I did not do was sponsorships,
Okay.
because I, like you, I'm a city dude. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna say what I don't mean. I'm like, okay, I gotta push your little product and say something
Exactly.
I really like, probably like, I don't like this stuff.
No, you got to like it. Yeah.
Yeah. The way I monetize Listen to Speak, is a lot of different guests come on. And I mean, some of these people are multimillionaires.
Right.
Give them a good experience. They say, you know what, man, I've made an amazing connection with you. I want you to come into my company as a consultant.
That's wonderful.
And
That's
yeah, there's
wonderful.
some teams there that need some of your help. And so,
Yeah.
consultancy, it pays pretty well. And so outside of doing the public speaking,
Yeah.
counseling, I also do consultancy, because human behavior, when people see that you get them and that you solve problems from the inside out,
Yeah.
that's what opens opportunities. So just for your audience, I want to let them know, like, I do consulting, I do one-on-one
Okay.
counseling, um, and I do public speaking. So, but that's
Well,
for
I love this. Jahmaal, and the audience, this, that many of us are suffering in silence. And many of us decide not to speak to people because we haven't found the right person. The right person is out there to be there for you, to listen and to speak. And it's okay to like test us all out because each one of us is not always going to be right for you. Somebody out there is right for you. Don't be afraid, please, or do it scared. Ask for help. Because there are people who just did it scared and found somebody like Jahmaal, and they're better for it. So I could talk to you all day, man. I'll tell you. I do have two final questions, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Go for it.
All right. You have the opportunity to sit down with young 7 to 10-year-old Jahmaal, and you want to give him advice about life. What are you going to tell him?
This is going to sound really trite. But I tell him, man, just be yourself. Please be everything God made you to be and be everything you're not. And you don't have to please everyone you run into. Some people are going to like you, man, and some people are not going to like you. Be okay with that. There's almost, I would say there's going to be nearly 8 billion people on the planet. Some you're going to hit, some you're going to miss. And that's okay. Don't put pressure on yourself. You're going to wear yourself out.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, don't put pressure on yourself, because we tend to do that, right? There's enough pressure out there. No need to put more on yourself, right?
Nah, it's basic arithmetic. When I realize this, I tell myself this almost every morning. The math will always math in your favor, Jahmaal. Always.
I love that. The math will always math in your favor. I love that. All right, put on a different hat. Now you're sitting down with young Jahmaal, the young businessman entrepreneur, and you want to give him some advice on business. What are you going to tell him?
Fail.
I love
fail
that.
forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity to learn. See the silver lining, young man, young entrepreneur. If you are dotting your I's and crossing your T's, you're going to wear yourself thin trying to make sure everything is perfect. Just do it. Some of even the best podcasts are done inside someone's car on the phone. And the production team cleans it up. Don't look for perfection. Don't worry about that fallacy. And you're going to make bad decisions. You may even make some bad investments. That's what writes your story. Your autobiography goes out, people say, oh, okay, I'm getting some wisdom. I'm getting scholarship off of his mistakes. Or I did that too, and that's how he overcame. But if you have a perfect white picket fence story, who's going to listen to you?
So true. So true. We need to have something be challenging in life to compare it to. It's because comparison us to somebody else is really not healthy, but compare yourself to yourself, right? That's how you learn. That's the wisdom and experience. That's great advice. And when we are in our education system in this country, we're told not to fail, right? You have to get A's, and you get something wrong, and we're afraid of making a mistake. We're taught the opposite now. I mean, yes, there's good parts to our education system, but I'm telling you, we are not taught financial literacy. We are not taught how to fail and how to bounce back. And I believe that that's going to come from people like you, Jahmaal, in helping people that it's okay to fail. Actually, it's good to fail, right? And so, always take what you hear in school system, government, all this stuff. Take it with a grain of salt, and then go out and find a human being who has been through the fire and bounce it off him. And so, he'll listen and he'll speak, and you'll get something out of it. So, Jahmaal, you are the man. Thank you so much. I'm grateful you're in my life. And again, thank you to Jack Gillet. You did it again, Jack. You're a very good connector, my friend. Any parting words you want to tell the audience, my friend?
Definitely. Easiest way to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Jahmaal Marshall on LinkedIn. I'm sure my website will be in the show notes, listenspeak.com. I'll say this, and this can sound a little crass. Since that word that rhymes with Ovid, we've had coaches out the wazoo. I'm not a coach. I'm okay. I've even been told by marketers, you should market yourself as a coach. It sounds sexier. I'm okay to say that I'm a counselor. I'm okay to say that I actually work from the inside out with root causes. I find something with coaching is that it often keeps people in a cycle of coming back. I want to, in about 6 months, to not have to work with you anymore because we've actually gotten you some results. And so I work with root causes of behavior, where a coach will work from the outside in, no, inside out. And we actually tailor this thing to actually get your results that you care about. So
And yeah, I tell you, Jamal's the real deal because, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamal, you know that people have those tools within them, right? And
Hmm.
you help get them out, and then you can walk away, and but you've taught them how to work with the tools from within, and then they don't need you anymore.
That's it. You don't
That's
want to keep someone dependent on you. That's a money grab.
yes, it is. Yeah, depend on yourself. You can use somebody like Jamal to help to get that greatness outside of you, and then take it on yourself. So, well, thanks again, Jamal. Appreciate you, man.
Thanks for having me, Drew.
All right. Hey, everybody out there, be well. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and give us a review to help others find it. I'd like you to answer this question. Are you living the life you want to live, or are you living the life others want you to live? I'd like you to think about that for a second, because I strongly suggest you live the life you want to live. If you want to learn more about what I stand for and my services and how I'm able to help many men get out of their own way, please go to my website at www.profitcompassion.com. Feel free to also email me at drew@profitcompassion.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Take care of yourself and choose to write your own story instead of letting others write it for you.